strong and mighty, but, that one tired me out a bit.
You got your work boots on.
I got the same ones you got on.
Oh, there you go.
The night everything shattered did not arrive with sirens or headlines. It came quietly in the hollow space where love had once lived, where loyalty had been stretched thin by years of silence, sacrifice and unseen wounds. Jolene Macintyre stood at the center of a life that millions thought they understood. A life framed by roaring engines, sparks of metal, and a man whose fame cast a long, unforgiving shadow. What the cameras never lingered on was the slow erosion of her spirit, the private grief that accumulated long before the public unraveling. She had been the steady presence behind a volatile dream, the emotional backbone of an empire built on risk and obsession. And yet, when the world finally looked her way, it was not to see her strength, but to witness her breaking. How does someone lose themselves while helping another become famous? How much can a heart endure before it quietly gives way? This is not just the story of a relationship undone, but of a woman forced to confront who she is when the life she built collapses around her, and when everything falls apart. What remains of Jolene Macintyre? The moment arrives after the noise has already left. No engines, no cameras, no raised voices fighting for dominance in a crowded room, only the hollow echo of what used to be there. Jolene Macintyre stands in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by spaces that once held meaning, but now feel like evidence. Empty chairs, cold lights spilling through windows without warmth. The absence presses in harder than any argument ever did. For years, her life moved at the speed of someone else's ambition. Momentum disguised the cracks. Purpose blurred into obligation. Now, with the motion gone, stillness becomes unbearable. The silence forces her to hear everything she spent years avoiding, the questions she swallowed, the needs she postponed, the version of herself that slowly disappeared while she was busy holding everything together. Publicly, the fracture looks sudden. A clean break, easily summarized, easily judged. Privately, it feels ancient. Jolene replays moments that once felt insignificant. Glances that lingered too long on indifference. Conversations that ended without resolution. Nights where exhaustion replaced intimacy. She wonders when devotion quietly turned into erasure. When love stopped being mutual and became maintenance. Her body remembers what her mind struggles to accept. Tightness in her chest. A heaviness behind the eyes that never fully releases. Even alone, she carries herself carefully as if still being watched. The world has opinions now. Narratives that flatten years of complexity into spectacle. But none of them touch the real wound. The fear that her value was conditional, that her presence mattered only when it was useful. She walks through familiar rooms like a stranger, tracing the outline of a life she helped build but no longer recognizes. Every object holds memory. Every memory carries weight. The sound of laughter that once filled the air feels distant, almost fictional. She realizes how much of herself was invested in keeping everything running smoothly, believing that stability meant safety. Guilt creeps in quietly, not just for what went wrong, but for how long she ignored the cost. She questions her own instincts, wondering if strength became a mask she wore for too long. The idea that endurance could be mistaken for happiness unsettles her now. She sees with painful clarity that sacrifice without reciprocity does not deepen love. It drains it. Outside, life continues uninterrupted. Social feeds refresh. Fans speculate. Strangers argue over pieces of a story they will never fully understand. Jolene remains suspended between who she was and who she might be, unsure where one ends and the other begins. The loneliness is not just about losing a relationship. It is about losing a role that once gave her identity. As night settles, the quiet grows heavier. If this ending was inevitable, she wonders why she stayed so long believing it could be different. And in the deepest part of that silence, a more frightening question begins to form. If this chapter is over, what happens when she has to finally face herself without it? Long before the noise, before the identity shaped by someone else's dream, Jolene Macintyre learned how to be steady. Her earliest years unfold in muted tones, quiet rooms, measured voices, the unspoken understanding that survival often depended on emotional restraint. Responsibility arrived early, settling on her shoulders like a familiar weight. She learned to read rooms before she spoke, to anticipate needs before they were named, to smooth tension before it hardened into conflict. The environments of her childhood did not announce trauma with drama. They taught it through repetition, through the absence of reassurance, through love expressed as duty rather than tenderness. Jolene discovered that being needed felt safer than being vulnerable, that usefulness could substitute for attention. Over time, this became instinct. She was praised for reliability, for endurance, for not asking too much. No one noticed the quiet longing beneath it, the desire to be chosen simply for existing. As she grew older, these patterns calcified into character. She became the person others leaned on, the one who absorbed stress without complaint. In moments of uncertainty, she offered certainty. In moments of chaos, calm, what looked like strength from the outside was internally a careful construction, a way to ensure she would not be abandoned. If she held everything together, perhaps nothing would fall apart. Psychologically, the cost remained hidden. Jolene rarely examined her own needs because she had learned to minimize them. Wanting too much felt dangerous. Expecting reciprocity felt indulgent. She mistook emotional self-denial for maturity, believing that love meant staying even when staying hurt. Subtle foreshadowing threads through these years. The same resilience that carried her forward also trained her to tolerate imbalance. The same loyalty that anchored relationships also made leaving feel like failure. Without realizing it, Jolene began equating worth with sacrifice, attachment with endurance. These beliefs followed her quietly into adulthood, shaping every major decision. By the time opportunity appeared, by the time she encountered a life fueled by ambition and intensity, she was already primed to support something larger than herself. It felt familiar. It felt purposeful. It felt like home. She did not yet see the warning signs because they resembled the lessons she had always known. As this chapter closes, Jolene stands at the threshold of a new life. Carrying unexamined wounds disguised as strengths, she steps forward believing she is choosing love, unaware that she is also choosing a role she has been rehearsing since childhood, one that will soon demand more than she knows how to give. The rise does not arrive gently. It roars into existence with sparks, noise, and an energy that feels almost alive. Workshops glow under harsh lights. Metal screams as it's shaped. Engines rumble with promise. Bad Chad Customs becomes more than a business. It becomes a gravitational force. And Jolene Macintyre stands close enough to feel its heat. In the early days, the chaos feels intoxicating. Long hours blur into shared purpose. Dreams are spoken aloud with conviction, fueled by adrenaline and belief. Jolene moves through this world with practice, steadiness, grounding moments of volatility with calm reassurance. She organizes, supports, listens. She becomes the quiet counterweight to obsession, believing balance is love's unspoken duty. As attention grows, so does the noise. Cameras arrive. Expectations multiply, the workspaces fill with voices that are not hers. Opinions that carry more weight than her own. Success accelerates everything, especially distance. Jolene's presence remains constant, but her emotional visibility begins to fade. She is always there, yet increasingly unseen. Psychologically, the shift is subtle but corrosive. Pride intertwines with loneliness. She celebrates milestones while privately mourning what they replace. Shared time, emotional closeness, the simple intimacy of being prioritized. Conversations become transactional, focused on logistics rather than connection. When exhaustion surfaces, it is dismissed as temporary, a necessary cost of building something meaningful. The world sees a partnership thriving in motion. Jolene feels the stillness growing inside her. She begins to sense that her role has narrowed, defined less by who she is and more by what she stabilizes. Her internal questions intensify, but she silences them, convincing herself that patience is loyalty, that sacrifice will eventually be rewarded. Fame magnifies imbalance. Moments of vulnerability are postponed indefinitely. Conflict is deferred in favor of progress. Jolene learns to swallow disappointment with grace, smiling through absence, translating neglect into understanding. Each compromise feels small on its own. Together, they form a pattern she is afraid to name. At night, when the noise finally quiets, she lies awake, replaying fragments of conversation, searching for herself in them. She wonders when her voice grew softer, when asking for more began to feel unreasonable. The realization unsettles her. She is everywhere in this success, yet nowhere within it. Visually, the contrast sharpens. Bright lights and public applause clash with private silence. Crowded rooms feel isolating. Jolene stands just outside the fire. Close enough to be warmed, far enough to be overlooked. She watches the person she loves become consumed by momentum, unsure whether there is space left for anything else. As the chapter reaches its end, success peaks. Recognition floods in. The dream appears fully realized. And in that moment, when everything should feel secure, Jolene senses something slipping irreversibly away. A quiet understanding settles in her chest. The life they built may no longer include the version of her that still longs to be seen. The fire burns brighter than ever, and she must decide whether standing beside it is slowly costing her everything. The pressure does not arrive all at once. It accumulates, invisible but relentless, pressing inward until even breathing feels deliberate. By the time Jolene Macintyre recognizes how heavy it has become, her internal world is already splintering. What once felt like endurance now feels like erosion. The setting grows darker, both literally and emotionally. Late nights stretch longer. Conversations shorten, sharpen. Silences become charged. No longer restful, but tense, filled with everything left unsaid. Jolene moves through her days with a practiced composure that hides a growing sense of panic. She feels herself shrinking, adapting, adjusting. Always adjusting until she is no longer sure where her own boundaries once were. Psychologically, the conflict intensifies. She oscillates between hope and resignation, between the belief that things can still be repaired and the creeping realization that repair requires mutual effort. Each attempt to express pain feels risky. Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates just like this.